Hi, and welcome to Old Guys, Gentlemen Flex Fountain Pens. And today's episode is episode number 16, I believe. And I'm going to do a little bit different today. It's not really a review, it's more of a statement of the direction that I've been going with my fountain pens. And have a little bit of fun with it. I'm calling this A Tale of Two Keyholes. Written by Old Guy, narrated by Old Guy, and recommended by the Old Guy Picks. There. First, a little background. I don't have a lot of addictions in my life, but I do sometimes with things that I like. And just to give you an example, I was perfectly happy with knives, having this nice little opiniel that I used for tuning the reeds on my bagpipes. And it was handy, has all these cool safety features, and it was only $7. But then I got it into my head, I wanted something a little fancier, a little bit more fun. And so I started working my way up the different knives till I got to the point where I would hear people talking about something called a Shirogorov, which is a Russian manufacturer of knives. And I just had to have one. And this is like $7, and this is close to $1,000. But I kind of had to have it. And the difference in capability and everything doesn't make any sense for the price. But the action is just slightly better than most other knives. And they're made really well, and they're nice to look at least for my eyes. And so I really enjoyed that until the Rask brothers up in Canada, Grimsmo brothers, came up with this Rask. And I was just mesmerized by the work, the machining that they did on this thing, and the action's kind of outstanding. I won't tell you how much I paid for this, but it was significantly more than this. At this point in my knife collecting, I have not found another knife as good as this. And so my need for knives has been satiated. But then I've moved on to pens. And the first pen I got was this Lamy Safari, which is a really nice pen. It's durable, you can put it in your pocket, won't get scratched up too easily. It's got a nice writing nib on it. But as the months went by, I kept getting different pens and getting modified pens, and really developed a taste for flex pens because I'm trying to teach myself Spencerian. I still suck at it. I'm even just experimenting now with copper plate, and I really suck at that. But it doesn't stop the need from having nice flexy pens. So I thought I had reached my holy grail when I got this Parker Maxima Vacuumatic that I ended up swapping nibs on to give me a nice flex. It's not the flexiest pen, but it's a beautiful pen that writes with some nice line variation without a lot of effort, and it looks just gorgeous. So I thought I had reached the same point that I had reached with this knife until I was talking with a pen selling guy. I forget who exactly, but I was asking, well, how flexy is that nib? And a lot of people don't even like to talk about flex. They don't like to use the word wet noodle. They come up with all these excuses about, well, I don't really like to give you examples of it. I don't really like to talk about it. Because it varies on the ink you use, the paper you use, the angle of the pen, blah, 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 blah. I can tell the difference. It's a little bit, it's a lot subjective, but I can feel the difference between a rigid nib and a moderately flexy pen, a full flex, and what I might call a wet noodle. So this guy was saying that this particular nib was not a wet noodle, and he said, and it wasn't anything like a Waterman No. 7 pink nib. And immediately my brain went into overdrive. What the hell is a pink nib? So a lot of research later, and what they're really talking about is Waterman, and I want to thank Jake's pens. This came along with one of the pens that he gave me. So I don't know if you can see this that well. It's a mouse pad. But at one point, I think it's around the 1920s or 30s. I should know that better. I'll put it on the screen. But it kind of as a marketing gimmick, and also to help their customers get the kind of pen they wanted, they came up with these pens with little bands on them up here, corresponding to the printed word on the nib. And they had them ranging anywhere from really flexy with a pink, that's a fine point or extra fine point flexi nib, to progressively stiffer or wider nib, so you could kind of pick the color of your choice. And there's been this frenzy, and I agree with that. You know, some of the naysayers on flex pens talk about the cult or the frenziness of flex pens, and I step up to that description. And that drives prices up to a ridiculous amount, ergo the prices I mentioned on the other knives. And it's really kind of a supply and demand thing. People start thinking, oh, I got to have that particular item, and all of a sudden there's less of those things. No one's making these pens anymore. So, you know, all you can do is hope one pops up, and then you grab it, and then you get into a bidding war, etc. So anyhow, I was really intrigued with that. The fact that this one guy said it's not like a pink nib number 7 Waterman, and he even added that saying, and I don't really even like those kinds of pens because I find them really difficult to work with. Well, I think because I've been buying mostly flex pens, my handwriting still sucks, but I've been writing with a lighter and lighter hand, and I really appreciate, there's no pen that I have that I have difficulty writing with. The flex, in other words, the flex does not hinder my ability of writing with stuff. I think things just don't automatically flex without putting some pressure on it, and I can have control over that amount of pressure. So that warning only made me more crazy to get one of these. But I started looking around, and especially the red swirls, there are hardly any out there that I can see. Maybe they show up at pen shows. But I expressed a desire for one of these to one of those pen guys, and he went to the show recently. Where was it? And it was a really big pen show, and the guy said he walked around and he didn't see any keyhole nibs, much less pink keyhole. So that made me think, I got to go crazy and try and find one of these things just to experience what this guy's talking about with this ultra flexy nib. So I looked around and looked around. I have active Google searches and eBay searches, and nothing was coming up. But then what happened was, in one of the searches that I had going on, there was a customer on eBay. Well, I got this cool case from Goulet Pens. It's a Girologio, probably not bastardizing that thing. But now that I'm getting some more expensive pens, I figured I better, if I'm going to carry them, I need to have better protection. The person who was selling this on eBay did not have very good pictures of it. And actually, I've cleaned this up a little bit, so it looked a little bit worse than this. And the examples that she gave were difficult for me to determine, you know, what a pink nib can really do. Okay, now that is not a pink nib, but it is a keyhole nib, and it's a red nib. This did have a pink nib in it, but I've since moved it, and that's what I'll show you next. But imagine the pink nib in there. So I got this thing, And I wanted to know, well, was this a number 7, number 5? And she didn't know, and there's no number on it. It says it's a Waterman's made in England. And she also said that John Modishaw worked on the nib, not this one, but on the pink one. So I began the process of negotiating with her buying this pen, a pink nib, which right now is worth a lot of money, and a body of unknown origin. I don't think these were made together. I think it was John Modishaw who fitted this to this pen for her. And it's a nice looking plain black pen. And if you're really just interested in the pink nib, that is more than enough. And it did write really well, but I'll talk more about that later. While I was negotiating with her on this pen, I noticed over at Jake's Pens, he had something that looked like a number 7, but it's actually a number 5. I'm not sure what the differences are. When I review each of these pens individually, I'll cover that. And it had a red band here, but it turns out he sells replacement bands because a lot of times these things break. So I ended up buying a pink nib, and I took the pink nib from here and put it over here. And so now this thing is a pink nib. So all this was a lot more money than I wanted to spend. In fact, that looks more, I don't know if they do pink for a pink 5 or that's just the color of this, but it looks like it's kind of like red, indicating that it had a red nib in there before, which is now in this pen, which is kind of a shame. But beggars can't be choosers, and especially if they're spending tons of money to get the only thing in town that they can find at the moment. And let me tell you a little bit about the pink nib. I don't know if it came like this or John Modishaw did it, but it's a really nice, fine nib. But it's a very, very nice, fine nib, especially with a light hand. And yet, even with that, it is really flexy. It's not the flexiest pen I have. It's not the pen with the greatest line variation. So I've heard that different pink nibs write differently. And I'm perfectly happy with this one. It probably wasn't worth the all the excitement over it. But it definitely writes nice line variations. And in terms of prices, this as a red nib pen was close to $500, and this as a pink nib unknown body pen was like around $700. And actually, she wanted more than that, and luckily for me, she came down some. So I spent a lot of money to get these two pens. But one thing I have to be careful about, I really like this pen. Really like the way it looks. I like the way it writes. It's definitely a keeper for a long time. But in my last review, I showed you this little guy, Conklin Crescent 20P. And let me get it started here. I think it writes even thinner. And has much broader. And this, $55. I mean, I had to do a lot of work to get it working right, but probably after I sell this one, this will be close to $1,000. Now this one, I guess arguably, here, let me pull this back a little bit. You could say the red swirl is prettier, but this one has some pretty good looks as well. This one has the craze going for it. And if I sold these on in eBay, there's a fair chance I could get close to $1,000 for this. If I sold this on eBay, I'd get more than $55, but maybe not more than a couple hundred at the most. And maybe it's a size thing. This is closer to a normal size pen. But when you write with this thing, okay, that's it unposted. All right, this is almost unwritable unposted. But if you post it, it's a perfect size. So, do you think I would have learned anything by this? Oh, here, let me show you the number 4. Here, let me show you the red nib, what it's like. Flex-wise, it's pretty close to the pink, but it's not, which surprised me. But the lines are thicker, so it's not as fine. And again, I don't know if John Modisha just made the other one finer, or if it comes this way. Although I think in the description of a pink, it says it's fine. And this, I think the red is a regular. But you can kind of see here, takes a little bit more effort. It rearrows a little bit. So this guy's still the winner in terms of line variation and flex. And this one's more full size and prettier, but doesn't quite flex as much as this. And this one's just good for everyday writing, and which is I think what the advertisement says. But this is a real nice pen too. And I think I'm going to sell this because I'm beginning to have enough pens that write really well that I can help pay off what I used to buy this one from. So, that is the end of the tale of 2 keyholes. I'm not sure if I'll ever learn my lesson about frenzied. I'm not sure what I'm going to frenzy over next, but it'll be some pen, and in the end, I'll probably spend a lot of money for it. It may be a little prettier than some of these. It might write a little bit better, although I can't imagine that. And then I still have my $55 Wonder Pen. And so I don't know if you could ever get any value out of any part of this, and it's longer than it should be, but until next time, thank you for watching.